Welcome to Outside the Box. This is a Stokastic by Fantasy Points production. You can see above me now. You can see our logos up there on the top of the screen, looking clean there. Our logos together, working together here with Scott Barrett. We're going to take a look at the best tools in the industry, both the best DFS tools in the industry from Stokastic and the best NFL data tools in the industry on Fantasy Points. I've been using the Fantasy Points data suite quite a bit. It has been very helpful for me. Stephen Lewis, this is a great question. What is this box they speak of here? KFC. Yes, we were talking about Kentucky Fried Chicken. We are outside of the Kentucky Fried Chicken box. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
No, thank you. Thank you for coming once again. This is our show now. We missed 1 week. It was sad to miss that week, but happy to be back at it last week. Happy to be back at it once again today. Oh, I forgot. We should pull up last week. I meant to pull up the I'll pull it up right now so we can take a look at the winning lineup from last week, talk about how last week went. There was I felt like last week it went okay for me. It had like a real possibility of going great for me. So it was kind of disappointing ultimately that it was like a fine but not great week. How did you do last week?
Yeah. So I think before we dive in, we should remind the listeners what this show is.
Yeah.
This is Outside the Box. This is a GPP contrarian game theory show. We're not talking about the best plays. We're not talking about the cash plays. I'm sure Stokastic has content to that end. If you want that, you can listen to the Cashing Points live stream over on fantasypoints.com. Read my article where I list the players in order, best plays. This is specifically, let's maximize our upside. Let's maximize our edge by being intentional and fading the chalk, trying to poke holes in the chalk, find ways that they fail, and then strategically think of ways to leverage ourselves off of the chalk. So if, one running back is 35% owned and the quarterback is 5%, it would make sense to play the quarterback. So that's what this show is. Just want to remind everyone. How did I do? I lost money. Wasn't great. I ended up, I don't know how strongly I touted them on this show, but I think late Saturday night, I was just like, all right, David Montgomery is the Uber chalk. Okay, let me make a bunch of Jared Goff lineups, and had a bunch of Tua lineups as well. Thought he was a great play. Those worked out, but I just didn't have, the perfect combinations, and really just like the cash went ham, and like, we're not going to profit on weeks where the cash goes ham. That's the antithesis of what this show is really about. So yeah, no Jamar Chase, no money. Basically, that's what happened to me.
Thank you guys for joining us. See a lot of people joining us in chat. Appreciate you guys coming. Scott, I think that was really well said. Like I always forget that like sometimes people don't know the point of a show, and this is it's supposed to be a tournament show. So this is for winning tournaments. Part of that is, and we got a couple comments last week. You're talking about the chalk too much, but part of it is finding the chalk to fade. Like it is really important to find low owned pieces that you want to play, but it's also important if you can find pieces of chalk that like you're going to be under the field on. I think that's also important to talk about in tournament strategy. So I think you just did a really good job of setting up what to expect from this show, Scott. But let's start by taking a look at the winning lineup from last week. So I kind of forgot that what you really needed was Jamar Chase. Like if you didn't have Jamar Chase last week, you were dead. He just 55 fantasy points. That is nuts. I think that was an important thing to get right, and something that I don't think that we did very well on last week. I think that, as I recall, I believe that you and I were both a little bit hesitant with the Burrow Chase stack, and that, of course, you needed the at least the Chase part of it, but the Burrow part of it also what was relatively cheap. Am I remembering that right, Scott? That was something that we were a little bit light on the Burrow Chase stack.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the Bengals were the worst offense in football heading into last week. They ranked dead last in points per drive. And it's like, yeah, if Burrow is healthy, this is a top 5 offense. And then they ranked 5th best by that same stat the year prior. But it's just like he had no mobility in the pocket. And like, that's one of his superpowers. That's Patrick Mahomes' superpower above and beyond arm strength and accuracy is that maneuverability, escapability, mobility in the pocket. And you take that away and he's basically, like Daniel Jones, where it's like, way better offensive line than Jones, who is easily like one of the worst offensive lines ever. But it's because he doesn't have like a healthy calf, he's just screwed. Like the first hint or whiff of pressure, he has to just get the ball at. And you saw that with his average time to throw. And then last week, he looked back. He had a 10+ yard scramble run. He had a deep shot that traveled 50+ yards in the air. His time to throw is back to where it was last year when it was insanely low every week prior to that. He looked great on some avoided sacks, some actual sacks. And Jamar Chase smashed. It was the second most XFP by any player in any week over the last 3 seasons.
Wow.
And, it was a great matchup. So everyone kind of understood that. Breece Hall, that was another player I tried to poke holes in. I said, maybe he breaks off a long run, but beyond that, it's, a Zach Wilson led offense. I get blah, blah, blah. And so he hit David Montgomery. I was like, okay, amazing play, but he's so chalky, 44.6% ownership right there. Let's come up with ways to, fade him and get leverage, which is how I landed on Jared Goff. Thielen, I said, was a cash play. I thought he was an amazing play. No one was on him. Dallas Goedert, you were all over. Premier tight end funnel matchup. Cheapest he's been in years. And so I could see how you get there for sure. It's just, I wouldn't have gotten there because I'm trying to be intentional in fading the chalk, being different, separating myself from the herd. And I think this is a great week for that, where you see there's no real games that really stand out, kind of low totals across the board, and ownership is really condensing hard around a few individual plays. And also the way lineups are being built, the punting running backs and paying up for wide receivers. Cash, I think, is difficult this week. I think this is going to be a great week for GPP players such as ourselves, however.
I hope you are right, Scott, and we'll find some great plays again this week. Actually, looking through this lineup, Scott, I feel like we were at least somewhat on every single player in this lineup, other than I shouldn't say we were off Jamar Chase, but you wouldn't have come out of our show thinking I want to jam Jamar Chase. I think a lot of these players, we were on Thielen. You and I actually talked about Addison, how much we liked Addison last week. Dallas Goedert, I loved. David Montgomery was kind of an obvious play. Breece Hall was a player that I love quite a bit. So I feel like most of this lineup, we got a lot of things right last week, but the most important thing to get right is the one thing that didn't go our way last week. I don't think that the process is wrong. I feel like the process was right on okay, if Jamar Chase is going to be chalky, I'd rather play some other players just because Joe Burrow's been so bad. And then, of course, and they were saying Joe Burrow was healthier, and turned out he was looking good. So I think the process was fine, but I think this actually makes a lot of sense too. If you are going to play Jamar Chase, do it under the assumption that Joe Burrow is healthy. So play him with Burrow, and turned out really well for Buckeye 151. One lineup in the Millie and won the tournament. That's the dream right there, winning it with one lineup. So congrats to Buckeye 151. But anything else you want to say on last week, Scott?
Nope.
All right, we can move on. Here's a segment that I think maybe at some point we will drop this segment, but probably as long as you are making winning picks. This is doing the Survivor thing, Scott. I'm not sure how many people actually care about the Survivor. If we want to cut something, cut the dime down, maybe at some point we can. So guys, give us some comments if you watch this video and you don't like it, or you do like the short Survivor conversation. Let us know, because I'm not 100% committed to doing this the entire year. If we don't need to, if people are not into it. But for this week, we both won last week. Once again, I believe I picked the 49ers. I'm not 100% positive that's right, but I think I picked the 49ers last week. So we can move on to this week. So I've already had one losing week. You already missed 1 week because you were gone and we forgot to fill it in. But let's see who we would pick based on what's available here. The Dolphins obviously stand out from they have a 14.5 point spread. That is enormous. The Niners up there with a 9.5 point spread.
It feels
the Rams,
low too.
Yeah. Oh, we do have the Bills going up against the Daniel Jones-less Giants. That's a 15 point spread there. So we've got some mega spreads here. So the Bills, the Dolphins are our biggest spreads of the week. The Niners up there, and then the Rams up there as well. Now looking at who we have available here, Scott, you've got a lot of these teams available. Who do you like this week?
Yeah, I'll go with the Rams. 7 point favorites against the Cardinals. Cardinals actually make me a little nervous. I think they're better than they get credit for. And also the Rams are probably more volatile than they get credit for. How many 3 interception Matthew Stafford games have you seen?
Right.
Yeah, I'd rather save someone like the 49ers. So I'll go with the Rams.
All right, you go the Rams. I'll go with the Dolphins. Just go for the easy, because I've already taken the 49ers. I've already taken the Bills. So like and you're taking the Rams. So I think that's just going to funnel me to the Dolphins. I have no issue with taking chalky Dolphins team. All right, we can move on and talk about the DFS slate. And I think where should we start here? I mean, we're going to start with quarterbacks. So I'll go to the top stacks tool. We have our boom bust tool that I reference frequently on the show is currently being worked on. So we're updating the ownership and the data in the boom bust tool. I'm not sure if that's going to be available and updated during the show, but we'll do our best without it if it is not. But starting with quarterbacks, it's pretty easy, and you can see what you're looking at right here, guys, is the top stacks tool. And you can, I've said this before, you can find links to all of our stuff in the description of this video. So if you want to check out these Stokastic tools, you can find all of our packages in the description of this video. And if you're looking to the tools that I'm using here, you go just to NFL DFS premium data. They're both under top stacks. And actually, these are the 3 tools I think that I use the most outside of the generator and the simulator. But what I reference typically on these shows is the top stacks tool, and then the boom bust tool for non-quarterback positions. And then I also reference the top showdown and single game tool all the time in my other shows, but obviously not for this one. So this is where you can find this data that I show on the screen that I reference throughout the shows. You can find these here. But we're going to start here on just the top stacks tool and looking at the quarterback ownership. Scott, we have Matthew Stafford coming in at 16% ownership, Joe Burrow and Tua both coming in at over 10% ownership. So I'll start this way. If you were to make 10 lineups, any of these quarterbacks that would not make it into any of those 10 lineups of these 3? I think you're on mute. Or maybe I have you muted. I'm not sure.
My bad. I do that every single time.
All right.
So part of the drinking game, folks. Take a shot every time. Yeah, I would have. Yeah, for sure have exposure to those quarterbacks. You're seeing Stafford look chalky, but at least by our site's ownership projections, Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua both are coming in a little light. Cooper Kupp, I think, is 8%. Nacua is 4%. And so like, that's just like the most obvious, easiest stack of all time, just doubling Stafford. So maybe he's not as chalky as he see. I don't know. Burrow, like, obviously I get it. That's your cash quarterback play this week. Seahawks, weirdly a major pass funnel this year for the Rams, by the way. Cardinals are best possible matchup for a quarterback. And then Tua, Tua just demands ownership every single week. Yeah. The Miami Dolphins right now, their yards per pass attempt, yards per carry, and yards per play averages currently rank most by any team in any season all time. This is just like one of the most efficient offenses ever. They have 70-point potential, as they proved a few weeks ago. They could do whatever they want. Like, obviously the spread implies a run heavy affair, and I think that's probably right. But I mean, Raheem Mostert's the chalkiest player of the slate. So like, maybe two is actually leverage. That's kind of how I'm viewing it. So I think he's a great play. That top 3 makes a lot of sense to me.
Okay. So all 3 of them probably would make it into one of your lineups if you're doing 10 lineups. Do you think any of them would make it into more than one lineup if you were just doing 10 lineups?
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Okay. I really like Stafford. I really like, Tua, and you're making me kind of think twice about Burrow. I was expecting him to be a little bit chalkier than that.
Yeah, 10% seems reasonable. Chris Oster asking, does this mean people are stacking him with Kyren and Higbee? No, but just, I mean, you look at Stafford's ownership and he's at 15% right now. Even if he splits that between, like, you just plan on single stacks with Kupp and Nacua, maybe they're getting 7% each, not getting a ton of ownership. And then you throw in the Kyren and Higbee or Tutu Atwell. Like, there are a lot of ways to stack up Stafford without including the pass catchers. So not necessarily with Kyren and Higbee. Can include the studs as well. All right, so we are focused on, so I agree with you. If I were playing 10 lineups, I think I would have at least one with each of these chalky guys. So we're not getting outside the box with the quarterback position necessarily if you're playing 10 lineups or you're not fully fading the chalk, but we are here to find some contrarian pieces as well. Scott, are there any other quarterbacks that you think who who else do you think would make it into, if you're just doing 10 lineups, who do you think you would have the most interest in?
I would definitely put Justin Fields and Jalen Hurts on that list.
Yep. Yeah, we have Justin Fields doesn't look great in our top stack tool. 7% ownership, 2% chance of being in the top stack. I'm hoping that's gonna flip closer to game time as our information gets updated. But he was one of the quarterbacks that stood out to me right away. Like Justin Fields against this Vikings defense looks really good, so that makes a lot of sense to me. But Jalen Hurts stands out in our tools as just like a great play here. 4% projected ownership, as you can see, or 8% chance of being the top stack. That's fantastic. I have a lot of interest there. So you can expound on your interest in both of those plays.
Yeah, I mean, I think Fields should be right there with Stafford and Burrow and all those guys. His stats are crazy. So prior to 2 weeks ago, he had never exceeded 17 passing fantasy points in a single game. Kirk Cousins had done it 20 times over the same span. CJ Stroud, rookie, has already done it 3 times. And then the last 2 weeks, remember the benchmark here is 17 passing fantasy points. The last 2 weeks, he's exceeded 27 passing fantasy points in back-to-back games. He's also running more, 10 design rushing attempts last week. That was up from 3.5 per game across his first 4 weeks. Granted, like this all came against some really bad defenses, but like the Vikings absolutely qualify. They're bottom 5 against quarterbacks this year. And now Khalil Herbert's out, Roshan Johnson's out. And so I have to think like, I mean, I like Donta Foreman as a value, but like, what if the offense just runs through Fields, both through the air and on the ground? I mean, that makes complete sense to me. And you're kind of seeing different, deployment for Fields the last 2 weeks. And that's exactly what happened the year prior. Like through the first 5 weeks, I wrote him up as my Exodia, which means like the number one must draft player you can't leave your draft without. And like, so I was getting destroyed on Twitter and my subscribers were like, do I drop him? And I told a bunch of them like, yeah, you could drop. He looks like absolute shit. And then they just changed the offense around, way more design runs, and he became this fantasy juggernaut. So why shouldn't we think that's the same thing that's happening again? And then with Jalen Hurts, we talked about this. I talked about, I think week 1 or week 2, I'm like, Josh Allen's going to be running a lot less this year, and Patrick Mahomes is going to be running a lot more. And then Hurts, like you've heard it when you watch the games, is like a lot of noise about how he's scrambling less. And that was true. Only 11.3 scramble yards per game the first 3 games, but that's up to 33.5 per game over the last 2 weeks. But like the bigger takeaway even than that is like passing volume is way up. He's attempted 37 or more pass attempts in 3 straight games. He cleared that benchmark only twice all of last year. Like this is what we all wanted last year, was like games to be competitive and for them to actually have their foot in the gas. But with this new scheme, this new offense, this new OC, volume's been a lot better for Jalen Hurts. And so like a lot of people, you're talking about the Jets as a bad matchup on paper, and that's certainly true, but it feels more than priced in. It doesn't also really matter for a player who, like Hurts, can score multiple touchdowns on the ground. Zach Wilson's terrible, so they should have good starting field position, plenty of red zone drives. And the Jets are a bit banged up. They're missing their CB2. Their CB1 is questionable with an illness. And so, yeah, I like Stafford. Well, who we talk about? Stafford, Burrow, Fields, Tua, Hurts. Yeah, love all those guys.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. Do you have any concerns? So Steven says, part of my question I have with Hurts is the Jets let you run more than throw. I like DeAndre Swift most from that game. Is that a concern for you? Or is that even better for Hurts because he's such a rushing quarterback? What do you think?
So I love Swift. I think he's an amazing play. And yeah, the Jets are a bit more of a run funnel for sure. But it's also like, I just think Hurts is that good. And guess what? He runs as well. So, and we're talking about 3.7% ownership. This might just be one of those quarterbacks who should never be that low.
Yeah.
Like even 7% is low.
I think that's a general good rule with a quarterback like Hurts. He's just too explosive. Like has so much ability to put up a huge game that, man, a fade never feels good. All right, so you've named several quarterbacks. Let me see if I can throw any others at you. First of all, up here, Josh Dobbs. We have at 7% projected ownership. He was a guy that I was really interested in until I look at the top stack tool. 7% ownership, 2% chance to be in the top stack. We'll talk about the receivers when we get there because I have interest in all of the Arizona receivers. So part of me is just like maybe just attach the cheap quarterback to them. Is that a mistake? Do you have any interest in Josh Dobbs?
He's a good play. I probably won't have him this week, but I wrote him up. I think he's a good play, but I mean 7% feels, I don't know,
It's
right?
pretty high.
It's not a chance to gain a massive edge on the field.
Yeah, that is true. That is the big concern there. All right. Any Geno for you?
No, probably not. But I really like Kenneth Walker as leverage off of Mixon and Chase.
I do too. Yeah. We'll definitely talk about Kenneth Walker when we get to so I do really like Kirk Cousins this
Actually,
week.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Geno exposure might be dependent on whether or not Chidobe Awuzie suits up. I would really like DK Metcalf if he's out, but
Okay.
I think he's probably going to play.
Okay. So we'll get more information
I
tomorrow.
don't know. He might be a legitimate game time decision. I actually don't know that.
Okay. I am a Vikings homer, so I will acknowledge that. But Kirk Cousins now coming in at 1% ownership. Justin Jefferson being out obviously hurts Kirk Cousins. Like he would have an easier time scoring touchdowns if Justin Jefferson is out there. However, now all of his pass catching options are relatively inexpensive for their role on the team. I mean, Hawkinson is 6,600, so maybe that's appropriate. But Addison relatively cheap, Osborne relatively cheap. Do you have any interest in doing a Viking stack with Kirk Cousins?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think that's really sharp. You know, you look at his 7,100 price tag, whatever it is. Obviously, like he's too expensive now without Justin Jefferson, but all of his pass catchers are extremely cheap. There's massive upside there. And like we've seen that before where the field kind of overstates the loss of a wide receiver one. Like Jared Goff has only lost Amon-Ra St. Brown for 2 games over the last 2 years, and he like kind of broke the slate in both weeks. I get it. I don't know. He's someone I'm going to have, but I wrote him up. I get it as a contrarian play.
Okay. I mean, this Washington defense, we've seen them just get absolutely torched time and time again. Is it time to consider like, can Desmond Ridder take advantage of this defense? What do you think? Any chance that Desmond Ridder can go off at least enough for his salary against this Commanders defense?
Yeah, it's certainly possible. I wouldn't play it that way, but I love Drake London, so that's probably how I would get my exposure to that.
Okay, just going Drake London. That makes some sense. I think we've named most of the quarterbacks that I am the most interested in. I could ask you about. I'm a sucker, so I've been just losing money on Bryce Young week after week, just because the matchups. He's always cheap, and then he seems to be in a lot of good matchups. So once again, I'm like Bryce Young, man. He's cheap. He's got that Miami defense, like gonna need to be keeping up. Would I be crazy to play Bryce Young here? Like, is he just not shown enough?
He had what 41 pass attempts last week, 3 touchdowns. I'm not going to do that, but
maybe in a 150 set, you would consider it.
Yeah, maybe I'll give him one lineup.
All right, fair enough. Brock Purdy 1% ownership. I mean, stack them up with any number of guys. Any interest there?
Yeah, I like him a lot. I think Purdy is a player you need exposure to every single week. And I know that sounds insane, but like he's legitimately the most underrated player in DFS or fantasy and like also real life, you know, Mr. Irrelevant. No one was drafting him. He was like my must draft quarterback in best ball.
Oh, wow.
Throughout his career, he averages 19.2 fantasy points per career start. That would have ranked 7th best last year. He leads the league in fantasy points per drop back this season. He's with the 49ers. He's hit the 49ers offense has scored 30 plus points in over 90% of his games. The next closest quarterback is Josh Allen at like 52%. And so like all it comes down to is just like, does he want to be greedy and hoggle the touchdowns to himself, or does he want to continue being super charitable to Christian McCaffrey? obviously this isn't a good matchup. The Browns have an amazing matchup, but it's also like one of the best teams in football, one of the best offenses in football, goes up against a PJ Walker led Browns team. And so it could just be that they have like, they're starting every single drive from the 30-yard line, and like field position is going to be amazing all game, massive touchdown potential. And so I'm leaning more towards McCaffrey as like an amazing GPP play, but I definitely think there's an argument for Purdy. Kittle, I mean, has massive multiple touchdown upside. I think he scored multiple touchdowns in 4 of his last 9 games. Brandon Ayuk is like quietly one of the best, like easily one of the top 3 wide receivers in football this year. It's just a little hard to tell. He missed a game, and the 49ers are slow paced and run heavy, but like on a per route basis, that's glaringly true. And it's a great schematic matchup for him. Ayuk crushes single high coverage, which the Browns run at one of the highest rates in the league. He shouldn't be 5,600. I know that. I think underrated ceiling potential, which we finally saw last week. He's a guy I'm probably going to talk about in this space every single week.
All right, Brock Purdy. We have sub 1% ownership currently projected for Brock Purdy, so definitely an interesting contrarian play there in Purdy. Any other quarterbacks you want to talk about?
Yeah, I don't think so.
Oh man, we are just fast this week, Scott. Last week I thought we were going to get done in under an hour and a half, and then somehow like the end part where we were like making lineups took a lot longer than I anticipated. But this week we are going to just fly through. So we got through quarterbacks already. Let's move on and talk about some running backs. Now I'm guessing I would know if the boom bust was, no, it says updated 18 minutes ago. Is this real? Do we have the boom bust tool? All right, so my biggest tell is going to be Chuba Hubbard, who was the most clearly wrong. But let's hear. I'll go straight to running backs. This is exciting. If we do have the boom bust tool updated with all of the new information today, that would be extremely helpful. All right, let me go to just the main slate. And then ownership. All right, so we've got Chuba up at 13%. So this is updated. Love to see that. So this is good timing. We are looking at the running backs now. We can take a look at the chalk. So sorting by ownership here, we have 3 running backs over 20% owned. Those being Raheem Mostert, Josh Jacobs, Kyron Williams. If you were making 10 lineups, Scott, do you think, or actually let's just go to, if you're making 5 lineups, any of these 3 that would not make one of your first 5 lineups?
I don't know. Help me out here. I think that's how we're going to play it.
Yep.
Raheem Mostert is like the best play of the slate by far.
Yep.
Just flat out. Like I think he should be. How often is he going to be like, what are the odds of him finishing on the winning lineup? Like it feels like 60%, right? So how do I approach that? My lean is, let's say I'm making 3 to 5 lineups, right? I'll have 1 Tua fade lineup, and then I'll have 2 Salvin Ahmed lineups, and then I'll have 2 Raheem lineups. Is like that the move? I'm not really sure. It's something I'm kind of struggling with. I
mean, if you take that approach, that is a massively contrarian approach to have Ahmed in 2 of your 5 lineups. That is, I mean, yeah, I think that is a totally fine approach. Now that's
what sometimes I go too contrarian. So like that's, you need to help me out here.
We're talking Millie Maker, right? So in a Millie Maker, I don't think that Ahmed is too contrarian here at 0.5% ownership. We have him optimal 0.8% of the time.
Well, he's an amazing play.
Raheem Mostert, I mean, he has standalone value, I think, Ahmed, and then he has a lot of contingent value because Mostert, has not always been the most durable player. Now you can't predict in-game injuries, but like anybody in the NFL is live to get injured in the middle of a game. So the backup running back behind the chalky guy who would still have a great matchup and has standalone value because he's a running back who should get some run against that Carolina run defense. Like, I mean, if they're up 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter.
This is, what did I just say? This is the most efficient running attack in NFL history right now. Mike McDaniel probably just has the Midas touch. He's probably not going to be Devon Achane averaging 15 yards per carry, but I don't think he really needs to. We know McDaniel is a running back by committee guy. We know the spread is 13.5 points. That's mega blowout game script where RB2s generally excel. It's an amazing matchup on paper. He's leverage against the chalkiest player of the slate. And guess what? He's also just like a good value and a great play. Like you could play Raheem and Ahmed together. And so I think he's an awesome play. I like him a lot.
I actually love that call, and that's something that I do all the time. Is if you get a running back who is super chalky, and part of it is because of the great matchup. Now here, obviously, it's not entirely that; it's also Mostert has been just absolutely crushing it. But I've done the thing a few actually the week before I won the Millie, so this is a few years back. But Alexander Madison was the chalk. We had Delvin Cook out. Alexander Madison was like the stone chalk. The Vikings had like the best matchup in the world. So I made an afternoon only lineup, and I put Mike Boone in that lineup. And guess what happened, Scott? Mike Boone scored 1 fantasy points, and I got second place, losing by less than a touchdown. It was he actually got stuffed on the end zone, so it didn't work out for me. But the point is, it is something that I love the idea of playing the backup.
Wait, you got second place in the Millie?
No, it was actually on FanDuel afternoon only slate. So it was 100,000 a first, 10,000 a second, and I got second in that. It was a single entry. I hand built one lineup with the plan of building more later. I did not do so.
The regression hit immediately for you. That's awesome.
Yeah, I actually had several of those over the course of that week where it was like I was getting close to winning, but not quite getting there. And then, of course, yeah, the Millie more than made up for the rest of the week. But I thought that was funny that it was like I went super contrarian on that one play, and that one play didn't hit, and that was actually what sank my lineup that time. However, I love the idea of playing a guy like Salvon Ahmed. I think this is the perfect spot where he's like in a great rushing attack, in a great spot. Nobody's playing him, as you laid out all of the great reasons, like great leverage. Makes a ton of sense to me. I actually have not talked about him on any of my shows, so I don't want to be making the claim that I had this thought prior to bringing him up, but makes a ton of sense to me to play Salvon Ahmed. So I actually like that idea. I think that if you're playing 5 lineups, the way you laid it out makes a ton of sense. Just play one that's like, yeah, I'm playing the Tua passing attack. Play a couple Raheem Mostert. Like, just because he's chalky doesn't mean you shouldn't play him. Like, there is a lot of good chalk out there. Raheem Mostert looks like great chalk to me, but then also if it doesn't hit, you play your Ahmed. Yeah, that makes I don't hate that idea at all of playing some lineups with Mostert, some lineups with Ahmed, and some obviously with the passing attack. And obviously you can also play some lineups that don't have those Dolphins in there, but they are pretty likely to hit. So love that call out right away.
I think I'd rather have lineups with both than lineups with none.
Would you really?
I don't know. We'll see how lineup building goes.
All right.
I wanted to talk about the other 2 players too, though. Josh Jacobs, like I absolutely get it. He was the RB1 in fantasy last year, and his usage and volume is considerably better than it was last season. Well, actually not volume, but like usage is definitely better. Like his target share is, almost doubled, playing more snaps. He's super due. Like I can't stress that enough. He's super due. And like the Patriots have looked like absolute dog shit. They've given up 30 plus points in back-to-back weeks. They're the 2 worst point differentials of Belichick's career as head coach have come the last 2 weeks. But that being said, they're only 3-point favorites. They have just the 15th highest implied point total of the week. That's like a compelling argument to fade him if you want. And like, maybe we should be looking for counter arguments against the second chalkiest running back of the slate. And then your RB3 by ownership was Kyren Williams. I will just say, I think the return of Cooper Kupp really kind of hurts him in terms of value. Like he's still in my eyes, like a low end RB1, but I was viewing him as this mid-range RB1, like, oh my God, this is Todd Gurley-esque usage. But we really saw that target share come down last week. And like, it makes sense. You have Cooper Kupp. You don't really need to be targeting Kyren Williams as much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Kyren like has not been super great. He hasn't been super efficient this year, but he's been scoring touchdowns, doing well fantasy wise. But the counterpoint here would be the matchup with the Cardinals. Like same thing we did with Mixon. Like for me, like I'm rarely really interested in playing Mixon, but then I was like, man, this matchup with the Cardinals defense, like what if they just want to run all over this defense? It kind of feels the same way with Kyren. Do you think that this Cardinals defense is better than I'm giving him credit for?
No.
Okay. So that's not the reason. It's just the offense probably not going to be used going through Kyron Williams quite as much. So at 6,500, no need to go there, especially at 21% ownership.
I don't know. He's I wrote him up as a top 3 running back play for cash. So like I just totally get it. It just comes down to ownership and trying to find ways to get unique.
Okay, that makes sense. All right. Any other running backs that you love on the high end in terms of ownership, or are we ready to get contrarian?
We can get contrarian.
I mean, Chuba Hubbard, like the case for Chuba Hubbard obviously is pretty obvious. We've got him at 13% ownership, but he's 4,300 starting running back for Carolina. Actually, any of these others that you want to poke holes in that you're not interested in playing at all, or are you just ready to talk about the more contrarian plays?
Yeah, I'll just say I like Foreman over Hubbard. I think he's better. I also think he's going to get more work. Doug Peterson said, we're still going to have a committee or something like a committee for Hubbard, and he's going to get his carries. It kind of implied like he actually might not get the pass catching role, which is like a big concern given that spread. And like, obviously I think the Panthers just get absolutely trucked. Whereas with Foreman, like there's a chance he plays 100% of the team snaps. So, yeah, I would have him above Hubbard.
Interesting. And they also don't even have Travis Homer there. So yeah, they're hurting there in Chicago, and a nice matchup with the Vikings. So yeah, that makes some sense to me. And we've got Foreman coming in at lower ownership than Hubbard as well. So that's good to see. All right, getting to the more contrarian plays. You mentioned already, and I agree with you. Your interest in Kenneth Walker here. We have him at just 6% ownership. Feels like natural leverage on the Seattle passing attack. Tell me how much interest you have in Kenneth Walker.
Yeah, I mean, I think he's an amazing contrarian play, given that Mixon's one of the top 5 chalkiest running backs. Jamar Chase is the absolute chalkiest wide receiver on the slate. So over Seattle's last 16 victories, their RB1 averages 20.4 fantasy points per game. That would rank 3rd best of any running back last season. In losses, that gets basically cut in half or worse. So you could view Walker sort of like Derrick Henry, the most game script sensitive player of all time. You really need that positive game script for a ceiling performance. I think the odds are better than whatever ownership implies, but like still not great. They're underdogs in this game. So really it comes down to that leverage and like, what do you stand to gain from a Walker blow up game? That probably only happens if, certainly Mixon fails, maybe, Jamar Chase fails. So, you could pair him up with Seattle's defense, and it's just a way to bring a lot of upside to your roster.
Yeah, I like that. Seems like a good spot here.
Also, back to Swift. I legitimately love Swift. Like I think he's right up there with Mixon and Kamara. So I think he's a good play.
11% projected ownership on DeAndre Swift. Yeah, it's hard for me because I think I love the passing attack for Philadelphia so much that maybe I'm overlooking Swift a little bit. It's also partially the ownership is like, yeah, he's getting, it seems to me like about how much ownership he should be. So for me, it's probably like maybe I'll be close to the field on DeAndre Swift. Do you think you would have more than 10%? Like if you were playing 10 lineups, do you think you would have multiple Swift shares?
Yeah, probably multiple. I don't know.
Okay, so you would be above the 10% even in limited shares. I mean, great offensive line. Swift has been really good for the Eagles. So
yeah, factor in ownership, I would. Yeah.
Okay. Who else? Who else do you want to talk about here? Who do you like that's contrarian?
Yeah, I think Christian McCaffrey might be the best GPP play we've talked about so far. Like, first of all, like he's definitely deserving of his price tag. He leads all players at all positions in fantasy points per game. And for tournaments, it's like unreal upside. Like if he has the game he had in week 4, you just can't, you're just going to lose. You're not going to profit at all. So what's the ownership you're showing? 7%?
Yeah, we have him at McCaffrey at 6%, 6.2%.
Yeah, McCaffrey should never be 6% in any week ever. And he has like a pretty high floor as well. Like he's scored a touchdown on 14 straight games. Game script should be good. 9.5 point favorites. Elijah Mitchell is questionable or out. But really, like people see the Browns defense and you think that's a tough defense, but that's like not entirely the way I'm thinking about it. It's just like 49ers, amazing defense. PJ Walker stinks. Like field position is going to be amazing. They're going to have
Don't say
plenty
that
of
about XFL legend PJ Walker. I'm a little bit offended right now. But you can go on.
So I just see massive scoring potential and should be a run heavy affair. And listen, it's Christian freaking McCaffrey. Shouldn't be 6%. Everyone wants to pay up for wide receivers. So it's just like an easy way to gain leverage. Just let me pay up for the running back who's outscoring all of these wide receivers.
Yeah, so really interesting. I feel like Christian McCaffrey is not somebody that I loved because I'm like, I look at him, I'm like, man, 9,500. Like, what does he need to do to pay off that price tag? He needs at least like 30 fantasy points, maybe 35 to really like separate from the cheaper guys. He's got a tough matchup with the Browns, but now you're laying it out, and I'm like, yeah, 6% does seem low. So like after you actually look closer at the ownership, it's like he probably does have, given his involvement on the team, he probably does have better than 6% chance, and that is what our tools are saying now as well. I'm not sure if maybe that was not the case earlier, but now we've got 6% ownership, nearly 10% chance of being optimal. So now he is actually standing out as a great contrarian play here, and maybe and after hearing your analysis, maybe I'll change my tune and join Jewish McCaffrey on the Christian McCaffrey train this week. I like the call. I feel like it's like it feels like the toughest week he has had to potentially pay off his price tag, but he's paid it off so many times and getting low ownership that you make a good case here, I got to say. What about so going back to my Vikings? Part of me thinks no Justin Jefferson. Maybe they run it a little bit more. Is Alexander Madison just so bad that I should never be considering him, or do you think 5,600 Alexander Madison is somebody that like maybe makes some sense?
So before that Cam Akers trade, Madison was like looking like an insane regression candidate. He had top 5 levels of usage and volume.
Yeah.
And like even if you're the worst running back in football, like that's going to regress to the mean. You're going to have some crazy spike weeks. So I get it. I would just argue it all comes down to usage. The last 2 weeks we've really seen that usage start to drop. If you want to click on the filters and then click on week,
Is this right filter down? Yeah,
and then all the way to the right, split, and then week. Bell cow report would have been better for this, but that's fine.
Oh, I can do
and
that.
Then
let me go to that. I've actually never used the bell cow report.
You what?
I've never used the bell cow report. So maybe you need to educate me here. All right. So
yeah, this is just something I've had in an Excel file for, I don't know, 7 years. And it's just given me a huge edge in DFS because like the thing that matters most for running backs is volume and usage. And so in the search filter, I would just type in Madison. And then I would filter by snap share or week or sort by.
So okay,
click on either
share.
one. So snap share, not snaps.
Oh, my bad. Snap share.
There we go. And so, you saw he was 70+%, and then week 4 it slipped to 66%, and then last week 53%. So that's like declining usage. I think maybe they're just absolutely sick of him. But hey, if it just jumps back up to week 3 levels, I think he's an amazing play. Great play. I think it makes a ton of sense. That's the big concern right there is the usage decline.
Yeah, that is pretty like consistent decline too. Just like we're going down every single week, losing some volume there. Yeah, this is cool. Maybe bell cow report is the thing that I've been looking for. I've been meaning.
You could also scroll all the way to the right.
Yep.
And XFP is like the GOAT stat, and so you see the last 2 weeks, 10 and 11, but before that he was seeing mid RB1 volume.
Yeah, wow, that week 1, man, that is some strong XFP there.
I think that was week 3 actually.
It's not sorted by I see. Yeah, right. We're not sorted by week. Gotcha. All right. Oh yeah. So if we sort by week in terms of snap share.
I'll be right back.
Okay, sounds good. So snap share is okay. It was not dropping in the same way that I was thinking it was. I was thinking that was sorted by week already. So we went from 73. Actually, was rising the first 3 weeks before dropping the past 2. All right. So that is interesting to see. Once Scott comes back, I'll ask him about a new running back. For now, I'm just going to play around, see what it says. If I type in Vikings, does that work in this view? Because that's typically what I do is I'm sorting by teams and looking at the full context of the team. What are they doing week to week? All right, so now we are sorted by week. And if I sort by snap share, It's still no, it's mixing everybody up. Okay. Good to play around a little bit with the bell cow report. All right, who else should I ask Scott about? Let me know if you are in chat, if you have specific running backs that you want to hear us talk about. Happy to do so. Yeah, Josh says Akers getting work now. Yeah, Akers has been getting a little bit
Let
of
me
work.
just say really quickly, right below Madison, Amari DeMarcado could be a potential leverage play off of Hubbard and Foreman. I think it's probably going to be a committee, but I mean, he has like vastly outplayed Keontae Ingram, was sort of on the verge of totally replacing him prior to his injury. If I had 10 lineups, I wouldn't play him. Tyler Algier, sort of same thing. We loved him last
Oh
week.
man, that was so so that was another thing that I feel like similar to Jalen Waddle. I feel like it was a good play. Like the process was right because he got like 18 carries, something maybe 17 against that Texans defense. Like you extrapolate like his career average per carry, his yards per carry for Tyler Algier, add in the fact that they're playing the Texans and he came in super low owned. I feel like the process was right there. It just he was awful in that game.
Yeah, and I'm usually not dead wrong. More often I'm just a week early, and maybe that's this week. You could stack them up with Atlanta's defense up against like a turnover prone, sack prone quarterback. I just don't think I don't know. It makes sense. Definitely should be more owned than he's projected to be. But give me 10 lineups, I probably wouldn't play him. A question for you though: what about Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor?
Fuck no to Zach Moss, maybe to Jonathan Taylor is going to be my answer there. I think
Okay.
I can't. Maybe I'm just salty because he last week it was like, well, the easiest thing that we can say is you're not playing Zach Moss this week, and then of course he has just like the greatest possible. Like, where did that come from? We've played so many running backs, we've seen so many good running backs not do well against that Titans run defense, and then Zach Moss just runs all over them after Jonathan Taylor came back. That was just crazy. But I mean, going up against this Jaguars defense, I actually think the Jaguars have a pretty decent defense. I'd be more inclined to play Jonathan Taylor and make a bet on the talent being able to overcome the matchup than betting on Zach Moss doing it again. How about you? Any interest in these guys?
Probably not.
Okay,
But I get
right.
it. I get it.
Yeah. So
Right.
to answer your question, Jewish McCaffrey, I think I will probably have 0% exposure to Jonathan Taylor, but it's possible I have. I don't know how many exactly I'm going to play tomorrow, but it's possible I'll have a little bit.
I'd probably play Moss before I played Taylor, to be honest.
Would you really?
Yeah.
Tell me why. What is the reasoning behind it? Like, do you think Zach Moss is he better than I'm giving him credit for
Well, I mean, just from a fantasy perspective, he's been like one of the best running backs in fantasy football, like insane
this year?
use,
That's true. That is true.
really productive. But in terms of efficiency, also one of the most efficient running backs in football. He's been more efficient than Jonathan Taylor was in 2021 by all key metrics, which is insane. And so you have to think it's like, okay, well, we know who Zach Moss is at this point, and we know who Jonathan Taylor is or what he's capable of. So, get him acclimated to this scheme and like watch him go nuclear. But the thing is, like, he missed all of training camp through that holdout. So maybe he doesn't know the playbook. Maybe he doesn't know the scheme when Zach Moss clearly does and is like crushing with it. Why wouldn't they just continue to ease Jonathan Taylor back when Moss has been this good? But yeah, give me 10 lineups, definitely 0 shares of either one.
Okay. We just got the question: how many shares of Tyler Algier in 20 lineups? To me, it would be one, maybe two. He's coming in at 3% ownership. So you play one, you've got 5%. Would you play more than one Tyler Algier lineup in 20? Do you think?
Yeah, 1 or 2. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't go overboard with Tyler Algier. I liked him better last week than this week, to be honest. But I mean, he got the
It's
carries.
just not as necessary. Like this is just a stacked
Yeah, that's
running
part of
back
it. This
week.
it's and cheap running backs too. Like we have running backs at every single price point that makes some sense here. So not as I think last week was the week that it made more sense to me. It didn't quite work out. I thought we had another question Brees Hall. I think you already talked about Brees Hall as somebody that you're kind of interested in. Am I right? Did you bring him up?
No, but our projections like him a lot.
Okay. Do you have any interest there?
No.
Okay. So the projections like him, but Scott does not love the Brees Hall. Coming at 7% ownership just seems about right. I don't know. Eagles defense kind of tough. Eagles defense is banged up. Like, is that going to be a big factor for you at all that the Eagles defense is missing some key pieces?
I like Garrett Wilson. I like him more than Brees.
Okay. I guess we'll get
That
to
would be
our
my bring back on Hurts teams.
okay. Any other running backs that you really wanted to talk about here?
Let me check my notes.
You like so to be clear, you like DeMarcado better than Keontae Ingram as a DFS play?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we're on the same page there. Trying to see if there's any other running backs that I have a ton of interest in that we haven't talked about. I don't think anybody's jumping off the page at me. No, yeah, nobody's. I mean, we didn't talk about Alvin Kamara. The fact that he's playing the Texans, like, I want to be completely out on Alvin Kamara, and then I look at him like he got 22 carries last week. So like, I thought that he had the 1 week where he was just targeted a ton and it seemed like an outlier. And then he got 22 carries last week, and now he's playing the Texans, and I feel like I can't be completely out on Alvin Kamara. Do you think he would make it into if you're just playing 10 lineups? Would you get any Kamara?
Yeah, for sure. I think he's a strong play. He's just also looks chalky according to this. Etienne too, great. David Montgomery, great. I get it.
Yep. Chris says somebody got hurt on the Titans. He doesn't know the name of the defender, and then they immediately couldn't stop the run. I missed that happened, that they had an injury on the defense, but maybe that explains it with the Zach Moss thing. All right, what do you think? Anybody standing out to you?
No, I think we're good.
All right, we are good with.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could play Brian Robinson plus Washington defense for the exact same reason we like Tyler Algier. They're just two extremely game script sensitive running backs, and Robinson's better. And yeah, but another guy I probably won't have exposure to.
Okay, yeah, I was actually, when you were talking about Derrick Henry and like game script dependent running backs, I was thinking like feels like Brian Robinson is like right on that same level of just like he doesn't play at all in passing situations. Like seemed like the last game he got completely phased out. They brought in Antonio Gibson. Maybe I'm overreading that situation, but it feels like he's pretty damn game script dependent as well. All right, should we move on? We'll talk about some wide receivers now. Pull those up. And of course, we already talked about quarterbacks, so we've already talked about these guys to some extent. But looking at the top of the ownership, Jamar Chase just by himself here at 21.5% ownership. So starting there, if you're playing 10 lineups, do you think you would have more than 2 Jamar Chase lineups?
Yeah, I mean, probably, but this goes back to like how intentional do we want to be fading the chalk? Like a zero? I guess 0 is too crazy.
You see the comment from here. I'll pull it up. This is definitely impactful. So we already really liked that Eagles passing attack. Now Chris and I just confirmed Sauce Gardner is ruled out for the Jets.
Yeah.
So that's wheels up in my opinion for the Eagles passing attack. Maybe the field gets there now, like maybe that takes away the contrarian angle, but that's really interesting for me.
Yeah, no, love Jalen Hurts. Yeah, now he is an awesome play. They're also down there. They're starting CB2, so that's huge.
Yeah, that's totally awesome. All right, sorry, I think I interrupted you, so apologies for that. You were talking about Jamar Chase.
It's hard for me to answer these quite because it's like Chase is an amazing play. It really just comes down to how much you want to, fade him just because of ownership. Give me 10 lineups. I'd say I'd probably intentionally have more Tyreek just to get off of him, and then also leverage off of Mostert. But I mean, like, yeah, I don't know. He's a great play. Also, if we get word T Higgins is like kind of limited, then he should be like 60% owned. So
right,
it's just tough to quantify that.
Okay, that's fair. All right, we talked about Stafford being an interesting play. Like he's getting some ownership here. Can you break down the your interest in the Rams receivers here? Like how much interest you have? Are you differentiating between these Rams receivers? Who do you like from the Rams?
Yeah, I wouldn't have Kupp ahead of Devontae Adams. And then like staring at that ownership versus Nakua's, I would rather play Nakua. I mean, it's a great matchup. The Cardinals are giving up the most schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. They rank or dead last to outside wide receivers. They're actually like middle of the pack to slot wide receivers. And like, maybe that doesn't matter at all. Or maybe it's an argument in favor of Puka because Kupp gained 78% of his yards from the slot last week. I think they're both like legitimately great plays. But at lower ownership, I would probably just intentionally pivot to Nakua.
All right, so Nakua, your preference there in part because of the ownership, but yeah, both were still very involved last week. Stephen Lee was calling me. I said not calling me out, but I said Brian Robinson not involved at all in the pass game. Apparently, he had 4 targets for 4 catches last week. I missed that. I watched the entire game. I did not remember Brian Robinson being extremely involved in the passing game. But all right, noted. So he can be at least involved in the passing game. All right, I'll sort by ownership again. That might be easier. Anybody else that you want to talk about who's getting ownership, first of all, that you are like totally out on, or you want to talk some contrarian plays?
I just pulled something up. I think this is interesting. Since 2021, Cooper Kupp has failed to clear 79 receiving yards only 4 times, and all 4 games were against the Cardinals.
Huh.
I don't think that matters. Like, that's because they used to have Byron Murphy in the slot. Now he's out wide, and it's a different defensive scheme. But I don't know, just a cool stat.
Yeah, that is a cool stat. Hopefully, it does not stop him. I guess if you're playing Puka Nakua, maybe you are hoping that Cooper Kupp stays under 79 passing yards again or receiving yards again. That is an interesting stat. So I'm playing some of my Minnesota Vikings again. I'll say that Jordan Addison, 11% projected ownership, seems fair to me. Like I would expect him to be more involved than he has been. Similarly, KJ Osborne coming in at 4% ownership seems like a fine play to me. Are you interested in either of these Vikings receivers?
Yeah, listen, I probably like Hawkinson the most, if I'm being totally honest. But obviously, you take Justin Jefferson out of the picture. Him and his 10.6 targets per game definitely raises the median projection as well as the ceiling for every receiver that's still there. You know, it's going to be a less efficient offense, but like, it's still one of the most prolific. Cousins leads the league in passing touchdowns, passing attempts, ranked second in passing yards. I will just say KJ Osborne has been literally the worst wide receiver in football this year.
Yeah.
Literally the worst. Yards per route run minus busted coverage, ranks dead last. Addison, like, I don't view him as like an alpha wide receiver one. Like, kind of everyone said that. Maybe Jefferson's absence actually hurts him. I wouldn't make that argument, but like I've heard it and I understand it. I think he's like underrated. Like, he's been more productive than he's gotten credit for. It's a good schematic matchup. He crushes too high coverage. I think Brandon Powell is being slept on. I think he's like legitimately intriguing. After that Justin Jefferson injury, Minnesota did play more 12 personnel, but Brandon Powell led the team in yards, led the team in target share. He's 3K. So if you're looking for like an upside play, he's the cheapest and also the lowest owned. So I just think he's worth mentioning.
Yeah, we got him at 3.5% ownership, 5% chance to be an optimal. So yeah, maybe I will consider some Brandon Powell also. At least we're considering there. I saw Steven just said somebody talked me off of a Vikings Bears stack with those bad defenses, and I'm not the guy to do it. I think I'm going to be playing a good amount of that game. DJ Moore we have at 5% ownership. What do you think of DJ Moore at 5% ownership, Scott?
Yeah, I wrote him up as a top 4 cash play, so absolutely fucking love him at contrarian ownership.
Yeah, I can't imagine that ownership holds. Like, I think that as we get closer to lock, we'll probably see that.
I haven't heard any other site talk about it, which is like so bizarre.
Really?
Again, we talked about Chicago kind of changing their offense around over the last 2 weeks. And part of that has been Justin Fields begging Luke Getsy to get him to target DJ Moore more. That's like an actual legitimate report. And so through the first 3 weeks, he ranked 25th in first read target share. He's been at 50% in back-to-back weeks, easily the most of any wide receiver. He averages over 40 fantasy points per game over the last 2 weeks. And granted, those were in some super soft matchups, but this is super soft as well. The Vikings are giving up the 6th most fantasy points per game to wide receiver ones, despite playing the Chiefs last week, who don't have a wide receiver one.
Yep.
Great play. Cash play. Like, I don't know. I love it.
Yeah. In tournaments just makes a ton of sense there. I don't know.
Can you let me rip on some of the cash?
Yeah, let's
That's what
rip
we
on some of the
usually
cash
do.
plays. I love ripping on the good plays.
I know, I know. All right, so uh, Christian Kirk, Christian Kirk and Josh Downs. Christian Kirk and Josh Downs. I think this is like one of like I said, I've been doing the bell cow report in a spreadsheet for 7 years, right? I popularized XFP in 2015, 2016. Now every site does it. One thing I've always done that like not enough people, copy me on is breaking up wide receiver fantasy points allowed into slot versus out wide. Like that is makes everything so much more predictive. And so the Colts are a bottom 3 defense against outside wide receivers. They're top 3 against slot wide receivers. Christian Kirk, even without Zay Jones, is going to be in the slot 70+% of the time. He also historically struggles against zone coverage, which the Colts run at the highest rate in the league. Calvin Ridley had a season high in receiving yards last week and had his best game in week 1 against this same Colts defense, where you may remember Christian Kirk had 1.7 fantasy points. I legitimately think Calvin Ridley's a better play straight up. So at ownership, obviously I like that. Josh Downs, everyone is making a big deal about how his target share jumps with Gardner Minshew, which is like super valid and makes sense. Yeah, you take out the hyper mobile guy and you put in the statue, he's going to target the slot wide receiver more. But Michael Pittman's target share also rises. It rises to 29%. That would rank 7th most among all wide receivers. He's one of only 5 wide receivers to have a 20% target share in every single game this year. And it's the exact same thing. Jaguars top 3 against slot wide receivers, bottom 3 against outside wide receivers. And so like a super contrarian single stack, Pittman plus Calvin Ridley. I like that. Downs also a guy I really question his upside. These low ADOT types. So yeah, super underrated. And they're both super low owned, right? What's Pittman? What's Ridley?
So we have Pittman at 15%. So he's not super low owned.
Okay.
Yeah,
I had him as contrarian. I if he's 15%, I wouldn't play him.
Okay. So that's
where's Ridley at?
And then Ridley, I just had it up here at 6% ownership for Ridley.
Okay, so that's super sweet.
We'll take that Ridley ownership.
I get another one for you. I think I like Adams, like obviously massive slate breaking potential, but where's Jacoby Myers coming in?
Good. Right down here, 8%.
Jacoby is another one of those guys. I toyed with the idea of him being, like I think he's cash viable. Like I don't know, he's not going to be in my cash lineup, but he's pretty damn close. You look at games with Jimmy Garoppolo under center, right? Jacoby averages 10.7 targets, 21.7 fantasy points per game. For Adams, games with Jimmy G under center, including one game Jacoby Myers missed, 10.3 targets, 21.7 fantasy points per game. So the same production, fewer targets. What's the long-standing narrative about the Patriots? The sell out via scheme to stop the opposing team's wide receiver 1. And so I don't know. I think Myers is an amazing value. I think he's a great play. I wouldn't fade, like say, definitely play him over Adams or like talk any shit on Adams. Like I think he's a good play. He shreds single high coverage. Patriots could try and do whatever they want. Their secondary is trash. And it's Devontae freaking Adams. So, but did want to talk about, Marquise Brown is another player I think is worth fading. Josh Jobs had just come out and said, he like texted Michael Wilson after the game saying, I can't ever let that happen again. You only had one target. That's on me. That's not going to happen again. Don't you worry. And he's also a player who has like the most insane man versus zone splits I've ever seen. He 0.00 yards per route run against man, but he's top 15 against zone. And so he's going to get more zone this week. Michael Wilson, a little bit interesting at 3,500, but really like, I kind of don't like either. It's just like such a brutal matchup. The Rams rank top 3 in schedule adjusted against outside wide receivers. So I think that's kind of an easy fade.
Interest. So those are both players that I have some interest in this week. And Wilson actually looks better in the tools than
these were among the first players I wrote up, but then you're staring at that ownership and it gets a lot easier for me.
All right, and here's where I want to get super galaxy brain. A player that so since we're talking about the Arizona receivers, this is a good time for me to talk about Rondell Moore. Is somebody that I've been toying with the idea of playing because he's had some carries this year. He's talked about being okay with playing the running back role. Now they're missing their one like known good running back. I think it's possible that Rondell Moore actually gets a few carries out of the backfield this game. And on top of that, we've got guessing the Cardinals might have to throw it short. And Rondell Moore is just a guy who sometimes will get peppered with like double digit targets. Am I crazy to have interest in Rondell Moore at 3,500?
Yeah, I won't be playing him. He's just been terrible. This like I said, KJ Osborne was the worst, but if you like lower the route threshold, Rondale has been the worst.
Two of my highest owned best ball players, by the way.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I mean, they've been fine.
He it's a slot funnel ish matchup. I get what you're saying with the carries. I just don't think he's that good. I just don't see him as a player with much upside.
All right, I'm going there.
Yeah,
you can't completely talk me off of him, but you don't need to play a ton to get over the field. Maybe I won't jam him into all my lineups because I hear what you're saying. I just think for like just from a PPR standpoint and the price and the possibility of a bigger role, expanding to different plays, I'm like, it's just intriguing to me. But we can talk about some. So I feel like it's hard to talk about this Philadelphia situation because I think Sauce Gardner being out obviously helps AJ Brown, helps Devontae Smith. I am a little bit concerned that they're going to get higher ownership here. So it's hard to know exactly what to expect in terms of ownership from the Eagles guys. Do you have any great takes on AJ Brown and or Devontae Smith?
Yeah, initially before this news, I wrote up Devonta Smith. We had him at only 1% projected ownership. It's a great schematic matchup for him. Jets play too high at one of the highest rates in the league. Smith averages 3.0 yards per route run against too high, well above AJ Brown at 2.18. Against single high, he's done nothing this year. So like this would be the matchup for, but I think you take Sauce out of the picture and that really changes everything.
Yeah.
I thought there was a chance Sauce could shadow AJ Brown and now it's sort of game over.
Which would have really made it interesting for Devontae Smith in particular. But I mean, I think that both are in play. Like we kind of have to see where the ownership goes, and it's going to change. I think with Sauce Gardner out, the lines are going to change we'll see where things end up. But if ownership stays anywhere close to where it is right now, I'll probably have a good amount of honestly both AJ Brown and Devontae Smith. I think that they're just for that offense. I think they're just way too low owned currently. We'll have to wait and see how ownership adjusts as things change. Another guy that I have been on a lot this year is Jalen Waddle. I mean, I was really on Jalen Waddle last week. One of the players that I was most over the field on. I think I'm going to do it again this week, Scott. I know I believe looking at the fantasy points data suite, I believe he had the second most expected fantasy points of all receivers last week, if I'm remembering correctly. I think I'm going to do it again. I think it's still just like this offense is so good. And Jalen Waddle had so many blow up spots last year and he's coming in at sub 3% ownership for us. I really love it. What do you think of Jalen Waddle as a play?
There are so many weeks where I'm like, if XFP were actual fantasy points, I would have won the Millie.
Yeah.
And like the Waddle call was like an amazing call by you. Where the process was excellent and you were so close. He led the team in targets last week. His 22.4 XFP was the third most of his career, but it was the second worst ever performance of his career. He fell 7.9 fantasy points shy of his expectation. This is a player who's one of the top three most efficient wide receivers since he entered the league by the same stat. So like a spike week is coming, due for a massive regression. I like that. I also like Tyreek though. Like same thing with McCaffrey is like unrivaled slate breaking potential. We have him projected for the most yards of any receiver on the week. Just a guy who commands ownership every single week, no matter what.
Yeah. The funny thing with last week is, so I loved Waddle, also loved Raheem Mostert last week as a play that was leverage off of Devon Achane. And like both were fine. Like neither of them created your lineups, but if you played them as leverage off of Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane, then they kind of did create your lineups because Hill and Achane were so good last week that it was like, well, you want to just play the alphas that everybody else had was actually the way you wanted to go. So it was, but I'm gonna keep trying. I'm gonna try it again. Maybe hope for some some Jalen Waddle positive regression here. and maybe he can outscore Tyreek Hill. And then I guess doing kind of the same thing with some Salvin Ahmed as the low owned contrarian kind of leverage play on the Dolphins. So gonna keep trying it there. All right. Garrett Wilson, you mentioned as a guy that you have interest in, coming in sub 7% ownership, just over 8% chance of being in the optimal lineup. Tell me about your Garrett Wilson interest.
Yeah, I mean he's super low on my list, but
Okay.
obviously I like Jalen Hurts a lot, so I'm looking for bringbacks, and you have him at 6.5. We had him quite a bit less than that, but it's like the same thing with Breece Hall. Is like obviously Breece Hall is capable of, a 70+ yard run, which like totally changes the dynamics to your DFS roster. But like Garrett Wilson could do the same thing. He did that in week 2 on like a routine catch. People wanted to play him last week, but his matchup is significantly better than it was last week. He had Patrick Surtain's shadow coverage. Now he gets an Eagles defense. Darius Slay isn't playing, and the Eagles were already giving up top 5 schedule adjusted fantasy points per game to outside wide receivers and to wide receiver 1. So good matchup. The guy also ranks behind only Devontae Adams in first read target share, but like he's really low on my list. Like right below him is Adam Thielen, who I have as a cash play.
Yep.
Great matchup again this week. He's just been smashing. Panthers are going to have to air it out.
I hate it so much. Adam Thielen just crushing my soul week in, week out. One of my biggest best ball fade, I think, of all was Adam Thielen. Like I have 1 share across all of my lineups, and it feels at this point like it was just a bad decision on my point. Like I thought Mingo was going to be better than he has been. I thought DJ Chark might be their number 1 receiver, and I was just completely wrong. It's Adam Thielen all the way so far, and yeah, I think we can keep attacking him in DFS. Any other wide receivers that you want to talk about?
Yeah, I got a bunch more. Nico Collins right there, 6%.
Yes.
I think that's like absolutely silly. He's priced as the wide receiver 27, but he ranks 11th on the slate in DraftKings fantasy points per game, more than Amon-Ra St. Brown. Is 2,100 more expensive. He had a worst possible matchup last week, but before that, him or Tank Dell was on the winning Millie Maker lineup 3 weeks in a row. Tank Dell is banged up and questionable. Robert Woods is banged up and questionable. He's shown a massive ceiling. He looks like an extreme value. And so 6% just doesn't really make any sense to me.
Yep.
Matchup's not great. Like I'll give you that, but still like that's more than baked in.
Yeah. Here's a really contrarian. Tutu Atwell. Like, is he still viable with Cooper Kupp back? We have him at 1% ownership, 3% chance of being optimal. He was still on the field plenty last week. Do you think that at any point is he going to earn any targets here, or is he just like he's getting lost in the Puka and Kupp?
Yeah, the Rams play 11 personnel at like the highest rate in the league is like 97%. So he's going to see more snaps than like most other teams' wide receiver 2s. I wasn't on it, but our head of film charting for fantasy points data, Brett Whitefield, is like legitimately the smartest football mind I've ever encountered and like an amazing film guy. And we always talk on the phone. I'm like, you got any takes for me? And he's like, yeah, I think Tutu Atwell goes off this week.
Wow.
I'm like, what? Why? And he's like, oh, I just love his matchup this week. That cornerback has been ass on tape. And so there's that. Like Brett is very infrequently wrong. So like, yeah, keep that in mind. I don't know that I'd play him. Like he definitely wasn't popping at 5,100 in any of the stuff I look at beyond Brett's recommendation.
All right. I mean, that's good enough for me because I was already thinking 1% ownership, given that he's out on the field so much going up against this Cardinals defense, like feels like he's got good odds here. He's 5,100. Like he's not like a cheap receiver for his role, but feels like the 1% ownership is kind of spicy for me. Makes me interested just because of that low ownership and Brett's recommendation. Maybe that's worth playing. So some dart throws in a Millie Maker setting. Drake London, I feel like I think we talked about it. I think you mentioned that you have some interest in Drake London, if I'm remembering correctly. He's 4,800 here.
He's an amazing play. He's cash viable for me. Like this is a weird week where like just a ton of wide receivers I love, or I could consider playing for cash, and then they're drawing contrarian levels of ownership for GPPs. So like obviously I want to play him. He averages since week 2, 7.5 targets, 12.6 fantasy points per game. That's definitely a disappointment based on where you drafted him in best ball leagues, but like for 4,800, that's really not bad. And then he gets like the absolute perfect matchup. Again, the Washington Commanders against opposing wide receiver ones are giving up 11.6 targets, 38.5 DraftKings fantasy points per game. So just like massive spike week potential. If he gets any route he's up against Emmanuel Forbes, is just game over. Forbes has given up the most yards, touchdowns, catches of any cornerback in football, and Drake London leads the league in contested catches and is 5 inches, 50 pounds heavier than him. So yeah, I think he's an awesome play.
Love it. All right. I was on that side, so I'm glad to hear that you are a fan of Drake London as well. I'm with you there. You said you had a whole list of receivers you want to talk about. Any others that we haven't gotten to yet?
Well, right there by your mouse is Curtis Samuel. I don't know that I'm going to play him, but like I don't think Downs is like a considerably better play. And you're playing Rondale Moore. This is another guy who gets some carries.
Yeah.
He scored at least 18 fantasy points in back-to-back games, leads the Commanders in targets over that span. Falcons are a bit of a slot funnel defense. They're way more of a tight end funnel defense, but a bit of a slot funnel defense, which is where he runs 70% of his routes. Give me 10 lineups, I'm probably not going to play him, but versus like a Downs or maybe even KJ Osborne or whoever, I get it. And then you could just tell me who's lower owned of these two, Mike Evans and Amon-Ra St. Brown.
All right, I'm going to go back up to sort by salary. We have Mike Evans at 9% ownership, Amon-Ra at 6%.
Okay, yeah. So I think our site had them both at like 2%. So
oh.
It's just like I thought, they were being slept on. But at that ownership, that's fine. DK Metcalf, 2.7%. If Chidobe Awuzie gets ruled out, wheels up. Otherwise, I don't think you need to play him.
Okay, makes sense. I'm trying to think if there's any others that I want to ask you about. I feel like I've asked you about most that I have a ton of interest in. Just scrolling down to the cheap guys. Is JSN ever going to become a thing? 3,600.
Probably not this year.
All right, you know what's happening this year?
It's just Seattle running way too much 12 personnel.
Alec Pierce, if people are going to be playing Downs, you think Alec Pierce, there's any merit to that?
If you want to play him, this might be with the week, just because you're probably never going to be able to again, because they're going to trade for Jerry Jeudy in a few days.
I know.
I'm not gonna play Alec Pierce.
All right, one more name I want to throw. Rashid Shaheed. I ran our lineup generator earlier and was surprised to see how much I was getting of Rashid Shaheed. We have him at 3% ownership, 5% chance of being optimal. Any interest in Rashid Shaheed for you?
Yeah. Remember, who are they playing?
They are playing the Texans.
He either popped really good or bad for me. Let me just check really quick.
I know.
Yeah. So
go ahead.
So I got it. So he ranks top 3 among all wide receivers in yards per route run against zone over the past 2 seasons. He ranks like 90th against man, and Houston plays zone at a top 3 rate in the NFL. So he popped for me for that reason. I ended up not writing him up. I think maybe I just forgot about him, but it's also still a little worried about Carr's arm strength, but he's been chucking it deep nonetheless. So yeah, he's in play. Good spike week potential.
All right. Love to hear that, because he was popping up in our tools a lot. And I was like, I don't totally understand why he's showing up so much, but that is a good explanation. That's why we have people smarter than me doing our tools. All right. Any other wide receivers you want to talk about?
No, I don't think so.
All right, then let's move on and talk about some tight ends. And by the way, guys, if you we've been looking right now, we are looking at the Stokastic tools. Again, I said at the beginning, you just go to NFL Premium Data, Top Stacks. You can find Boom Bust tool here if you want to check that out. And then, of course, we've been looking from time to time at the Fantasy Points Data Suite, which I look at it all the time when we're not on these shows. It's a little bit harder for me to navigate on the fly, just because there's so much information here to look at. But there is just a ton of great info in the data suite. So I just want to give a quick shout out to these tools that we are using here today, which again, I'm primarily using the Boom Bust from Stokastic. We're using all the, like I look at the advanced rushing, advanced receiving stuff all the time in the fantasy points data suite. Sounds like I should be looking at the Belka report more than I have been to this. It's one that I've been thinking about. Like that might be what I actually need to find this information quickly. But a lot of great information on both sites, and you can find link to fantasy points in the description of this video. You can see on the top of the screen if you want to find the data point, the fantasy suite specifically, but you can also just find it from the main page. Well, you have any deals going on with the data suite? I mean, it's only like $50 for the year. Is that the
Yeah,
going
it's
right now?
gonna be $200 next year, so get it at a discount, 75% off. We have some comments though. Someone asked, "Is Evans a Q tag?" Yeah, he might still be listed as questionable, but he's going to play. We got word yesterday he's going to play, and he should be fine. And then someone else asked about Brandon Ayuk. We talked about him in the Purdy section. He has like an amazing schematic matchup. And he's been like a top 3 wide receiver in football on a per route basis. He's been freaking incredible, like super underrated ceiling, I think. But I don't know that I'd play him off of Purdy teams. I do like McCaffrey a lot, and Kittle maybe has multiple touchdown upside. So give me 10 lineups. I probably wouldn't play him, but I wrote him up and then deleted it. I get it.
Okay. And then did you see any interest in Jonathan Mingo?
No, I don't think so. I think there's better values, and I like Thielen.
Okay.
And he hasn't been good at all. So
yeah, at this point. Yeah, as Steven says, like I think this is the case to be made, is like he has gotten some targets and they will have to throw against this Miami team. So I can see a case for Mingo. I think earlier in the year, you and I actually liked Mingo in one of those games, and it just hasn't happened so far. Maybe it's still coming. I don't hate the call. Like I think that I could play a Mingo lineup or two. I might have some, but not just not a huge priority on this slate. Tight ends, I feel like this is one of the uglier slates from tight end, in my opinion. Like I don't love it. I think it's going to be a lot of tight ends just being in the game stack that I'm playing. They're either going to be with my quarterback or they're going to be the run back for my quarterback a lot of the time, more often than usual. Like there just aren't that as many standout tight ends this week as there are some other weeks. Do you see it the same way? Are there any other tight ends that you love on this slate, Scott?
Yeah, love Logan Thomas. I think he's a legitimately amazing play. So if you like injury adjust his numbers, he's averaging 6.9 targets per 4 quarters, 13.6 fantasy points per 4 quarters. Both numbers would rank 4th most among all tight ends, not just on this slate. I guess a close 2nd or 3rd on the slate. His price is the tight end 13. Atlanta is a top tight end funnel matchup. By schedule adjusted fantasy points per game allowed, they rank 3rd best to wide receivers, 7th best to running backs, 3rd worst to tight ends. Falcons also play 2 high coverage at a super high rate. Thomas has been crushing 2 high coverage. He's my cash tight end of the week. Really like him.
All right. Love to hear that. That is a contrarian play. We've got him at just 8% ownership. Stephen pointed out people are falling in love with Pitts again off 1 week. So we'll see if that works out. Yeah, Pitts is a guy that I've gotten wrong. However many games he's played in the NFL, that's how many times I've gotten Pitts wrong. And I'll probably play Pitts a little bit again this week. I don't know that I don't love him, but he's down at 3,500 against this Commanders defense. Like, do you have any interest in Pitts here?
Yeah, I get it. I wrote him up. I think there's better tight end plays, but volume's been crazy good. Arthur Smith said 2 weeks ago Pitts isn't quite right, but earlier this week he said he's back to full health. Pitts has said he's back to full health, and if that's like actually true, like all the injury like experts on Twitter still think it's another few weeks, but if that's actually true, like super get it, definitely get it. Jonnu Smith is also popping as a value. Like he ranks 2nd among all tight ends in receiving yards since week 2. But Jonnu would have the better matchup because Washington's cornerbacks are trash, and he actually runs routes against cornerbacks. Okay. So I could see a spike week coming. But no, I remember I sort of hitched my wagon to Drake London. So
Yep.
That's how I would play it, especially at ownership.
All right. Other tight ends that you have interest in?
Yeah, TJ Hawkinson, like legitimately great play.
Yep. Looks right in our tools too. So you can see here in the boom bust, 9% projected ownership, 15% chance of being optimal for TJ Hawkinson. It's unclear what his role will be without Justin Jefferson. I don't think he's played without Justin. Maybe I don't remember if he has, but I think you can expect probably double-digit targets for TJ Hawkinson, I would think.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, like he was basically Kelsey tier without Justin Jefferson, and now, or with Justin Jefferson, now he's out. Like that's just easy. And like KJ Osborne, like I said, worst wide receiver in football this year. Addison probably not an alpha. Brandon Powell, who the fuck is that? So why not? George Kittle, 0.9%. Like I said, I think the 49ers are going to have, they could have starting field position in the red zone every single drive. I do not trust PJ Walker. Their defense is elite. I see underrated scoring potential, and he's scored multiple touchdowns in 4 of his last 9 games. So that's probably a tight end that should never be sub 1%. So a little crazy. He's sub 1%.
Sorry, who was that again?
George Kittle.
Oh, George. Yeah, that is low ownership for George Kittle. I was just looking up Laviska Shenault because I see we have this comment. I think it's a good one from Chris along the lines of Rondell Moore. A play I just thought of for Neil, since you brought up Rondell Moore earlier. Imagine the Panthers play some Laviska at running back, but he's a wide receiver. Yeah, I think that's a similar play, to be honest. Laviska Shenault also has some.
I don't really like chase this just because when wide receivers are getting that role, it's really just like a few targets out of the backfield with a negative ADOT, and then like a few carries, like what that never come inside the red zone, unless you're Deebo Samuel. Then like that's insane. But like the rest of the time, it's like outside of the red, and just like not worth much in terms of XFP, which is what I typically chase.
All right, that's fair. It's more sexy when you've got running backs playing wide receiver. You always hear about, oh, he's going to play some slot this year, and it's like, ooh, that's PPR points. That's going to happen. That's going to be so fun. And then it rarely actually works out. They're usually lying, a la Jahmyr Gibbs this year. Like we're going to use him in a bunch of ways people have never seen before, and it just doesn't happen. But I thought it's an interesting call out at the very least. It is similar to the Rondell Moore play. So that's a more of a Neil play than a Scott play, I guess. All right. Any other tight ends you want to talk about?
Zach Ertz, obviously volume's been there. It's a tight end funnel matchup. Dallas Goedert, like you were all over him last week. He had an amazing matchup last week. It was an amazing matchup, but now Jets down 2 cornerbacks, probably not anymore. And then that's probably it.
So it becomes a worse matchup because now they're not going to be focused on Dallas Goedert as much, because now it's not like Sauce Gardner's not going to be on AJ Brown, opens up the better receivers. Is that the reason this would be?
Yeah, it was a tight end funnel matchup, but then you're down 2 starting cornerbacks. Like you probably don't need a funnel to the tight end anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cole Kmet, when we talked about Justin Fields, is Cole Kmet somebody you and I have talked? I think we've talked about how there is a lot of correlation in the spike weeks. With when Justin Fields has spike weeks, Cole Kmet typically has spike weeks. Do you think that's something we can hope for going forward?
Yeah, I think he absolutely makes sense for a Justin Fields, possible dub stack, or maybe bring back on the opposite side. But yeah, probably not playing him outside of that if I don't have exposure to those 2 quarterbacks.
Okay. And I'll bring up Foster Moreau just because OG brought him up. Do you have any interest in Foster Moreau with Juwan Johnson out?
I honestly haven't given that any thought. I'll have to dive in and check Jimmy Graham's usage.
Yeah, that's a good point. Jimmy Graham. I forget about Jimmy Graham. He scored at least 1 touchdown on the year too. We have Moreau at 0.1% ownership, 0.3% chance of being optimal. So yeah, a little bit of positive leverage there.
Oh, Evan Ingram's a great play, but like ownership is already there.
Yeah, 13% ownership, but yeah, makes some sense to get there.
I wrote him up early in the week, and I'm like, I think he's going to be super slept on in DFS this week, and nope.
Yeah,
nope.
Turns out we're on to him.
Yeah.
All right. Any other tight ends you want to talk about, or should we make some lineups? Or I guess we have talked about defense some, and I feel like you're pretty good at finding the right defenses. Are there any defenses that are standing out to you this week?
Oh man. Yeah, let me see. Not off the top of my head.
Okay. I think it's fine if we don't talk about
Oh,
defenses, but
actually, I don't know. I don't know. But I was gonna say Browns are kind of like sneaky contrarian because they're so cheap and they do have an amazing defense. PJ Walker, though, I don't know. Um, Tampa against Lions on the road kind of makes sense. I like dumpster diving for
cheap defense.
defenses. Patriots defense, maybe they bounce back.
Or what about would you ever consider playing the Raiders defense against, I mean, Mac Jones, like fighting for his life at this point? Who knows how that's going to go?
No, obviously, yeah, no, that makes a ton of sense. But they're like the second most expensive defense, right?
They are, yes, they are the second most expensive defense. Not getting ownership, so that's. But yeah, they're not the dumpster dive for the cheap defense.
Lions I don't know. This is kind of a tough week. Sorry.
I mean, that's fair. I mean, most of our shows we just skip over defenses because it's like, yeah, just play a mix of defenses. I don't know, just play who projects well, but don't go too chalky. It's defense is tough. I'm trying to think of like, I mean, Rams make some sense, but I'm looking at the expensive teams. Among the cheap teams, it is a tough week. I'm with you there. Bears against the Vikings, maybe.
Let me pull up what our projections say. Okay, best values according to our projections are interesting. Patriots, Vikings, Lions, Browns, 49ers.
Patriots, Vikings, Lions, Browns, 49ers.
Yeah. Oh, nope.
All right.
Sorry, that was wrong.
Okay.
Patriots, Vikings, Browns, Buccaneers, 49ers.
Okay. Buccaneers at 2,300. Yeah, I guess they're pretty cheap. All right. You want to make some lineups?
Let's do it.
All right. We are ready to make some lineups. We're going to do 2 lineups. I'm going to lead the first one, or do you want to lead the first one? I'll lead the second one. What do you think?
Let's do it.
All right. We will in the Millie Maker. Let's see if it actually lets me enter a lineup this time. So if I am starting, I'm going to start with a Jalen Hurts stack. I really like the low owned Hurts currently. I'm going to stack him up with, and here's where I can't decide. Do I want to go Brown or Smith? I feel like Smith hasn't really done it yet this year. So I kind of like the idea of going to the wide receiver 2 and hope that he has the blow up game here. I'll think about whether we actually want to double stack. We can consider that later on. I'll leave it at that as the start of the stack. Who should we add to this lineup, Scott?
I guess Garrett Wilson, just because he's a bring back and no one else is on it.
That's true. Getting contrarian right away. Do you want to make another? Do you have any running backs that you think?
Yeah, I'll play Salvin Ahmed.
Yes. All right.
We're going to need a salary saver.
Yep. I like that. All right. Maybe we throw a DST in there just to get an idea of, should we play the Bucks? What do you think?
Yeah, why not?
Throw the Bucks in there.
That's Montgomery leverage.
Yep. So now we're at 5,500 per player remaining. Who do you think fits in this build?
I kind of want to go crazy here.
Let's get nuts. I'm in.
Can we fit McCaffrey?
Oh, we can try.
And Logan Thomas?
Yep. Oh yeah, Logan Thomas is 3,500. Right, okay. All right, so back to 4,500 per play. So now we got to go kind of cheap here. Of course, we have the cheap. Like if we could do a 4,700 receiver and go to Chuba Hubbard if we really wanted to. That would be Jahan Dotson. Wait, Drake London would allow us for a 4,200. Yep. Who do we have in the flex at 4,200?
Wait, scroll up for a second. We could do KJ Osborne in a cheaper defense, but scroll down. Downs.
Josh Downs, yeah.
Let me see. Hold on. Curtis Samuel.
We could also is there a cheaper defense that would be Browns now against the Niners? That's tough.
No, like I said, I kind of get it just because they have such a good defense. Right?
The Browns?
Yeah, like when would you
So we could go Browns here and then play Chuba Hubbard in the flex.
like the Browns were 4,200 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. It's a tough matchup.
I just say fuck it. Like, who knows? Maybe they get a fumble recovery touchdown. Like,
all right, well then let's do it. I'd say I'm in. If we want to go just Browns and then go to Chuba Hubbard here, I think this is a really nice looking lineup. What do you think?
What about Foreman? Are they the same price or is Foreman more?
Oh, I want to say Foreman's 100 more. Yeah, Foreman's 100 more. So we can't fit Foreman into
No, that's
this
fine.
lineup.
No, this is fine.
It's a fairly contrarian.
This is
lineup.
a week you want a running back in the flex, I think.
Yeah. No, I think we have some super contrarian pieces here, and then we have some pretty chalky pieces. Actually, we don't have that much in terms of chalk. Now that I'm looking, I'm like, yeah, we have Chuba Hubbard might be a little bit chalky, but outside of Hubbard, I don't see anybody here getting really chalky. So let's see if it lets me. I don't get it. All right. It finally let me enter a lineup. I don't have to go on my phone. It's a beautiful thing. All right. Let's do one more. Enter in the Millie Maker. We'll create a new lineup. How do you want to start it?
Do you want to do Fields or Tua lineup? Let's do Fields. Let's do Fields plus DJ Moore. Easy.
That's a pretty easy lineup right away.
What's the cost on Komet? $4,600. All right, we'll save that decision for later.
I didn't realize he was that expensive. I still like him, but it's We could so a Vikings bring back. We could do Addison. We could put Hawkinson in there too. I guess we can save that a little bit. Who are the running backs that we have not?
I kind of liked Hawkins. Yeah, we'll save it. No, you're right. Smart.
Okay. Our guy Kenneth Walker is here. Kind of an interesting play. Of course, we have Raheem Mostert.
I'd go Mostert or Ahmed, one or the other.
We already went Ahmed in our. Right. Do we want to have Ahmed in 100% of the lineups we build on stream? I'm not opposed to it, but it's it'd be kind of funny because it'd be funny if we get 0.6 points out of him this week and we have him in both of our lineups, but certainly plausible. All right. So we went Mostert. We can think about whether we want Hawkinson or Osborne, Addison, even
Let's put Hawk in there. Let's just put Hawk. There's a lot of wide receivers I like.
All right.
And I do like Hawk the most. More upside too for the tight end position.
Yep.
All right. Pick between Thielen and Nico.
Thielen and Nico.
Pick one.
I'm going Nico. Nico is, again, so I talked about how Thielen is my biggest regret in best ball. Nico is the player that I spent more on than any other player in best ball. So I love Nico. I just want to cheer for Nico over Thielen. So I'm going Nico. We played London in our last lineup.
What about Ridley?
Yes. 6,700. So we only have 44. Well, we can put in Ridley, throw a defense in there, and then we'll see what we have left.
Yeah, let's go back to Bucks defense.
Yep.
Oh, what about Walker plus Seattle defense as Bengals leverage? Can we afford that or no?
No. So we have 4,300 left per player at this point.
We could do another Ahmed team.
We could do another Ahmed team. Wait, what was his price tag? Wasn't he 4,500?
We probably like him more than anyone else in the industry. So why not just
true
that flag?
It's funny because he's more expensive than Foreman and Chuba Hubbard. So if those guys don't pan out and he does, we're going to be in a good spot here. And we could put Downs here in flex if we wanted to now. That would be the perfect fit here would be Downs, who you did not like, but
yeah, it's a single stack with Ridley.
Oh, that's right. There is that correlation.
You want to just take out Mostert and put in Walker and Seattle defense and just see what happens?
Sure.
And then you're just betting on Seattle winning the game. which I don't know.
Yep. All right, we're
40% odds.
So now we have 3,100 left over in the flex.
Brandon Powell, nah. All right, we'll go back to what you had before, or just take out Walker, and then you could pick whichever running backs you want, and take out Seahawks defense too.
Yeah, then we'll put the Bucks back in there. Now we have 5250. We had Mostert in there. You like Swift quite a bit, so we played.
Yeah.
Do you want to go back to that part? Play a different part of the.
I like it.
And then we bet Foreman, if we want to.
Oh, I love. No, maybe
with Fields. You don't like the. Do you like Foreman with Fields or no?
Fuck it. Yeah, fuck it. He underrated as a receiver. He ran a bunch of routes in week 1.
There you have it. I think we made 2 beautiful lineups just now.
Look at us.
I think one of these is about to win a milli.
What about like the first second with the first ever second milli finish with 0 overlap?
I mean, if Ahmed puts up 200 fantasy points, I think we've got a good shot. Being the only 2 lineups with Salvin Ahmed in them. Let's see. We got a lot of comments on these. This one, I like this one. Brandon says Ahmed, LOL. I mean, it is a very off the wall play that both of us happen to like. Actually, this is different than last week. You and I were both independently on Tyler Algier. This week, you brought up Ahmed. I'm like, hell yeah, that's a good play. I hadn't thought about it, but I do like the play.
All right, I need to give ourselves an out and just say like the coward's way out on this is just well, he's 0.2% ownership owned, and so what are the chances he's on the winning milli maker lineup? It's going to be over 0.2%. So yeah, I don't know. I legitimately think like he's a great play. So when he flops and Chris Brooks has 2 touchdowns, you can blame me. Yeah. By the way, the Chris Brooks thing, people have talked about this because Ahmed was a healthy scratch last week. I went back and I read through all the transcripts of the Mike McDaniels and press conference quotes. And it really seemed to me like Ahmed was a not perfectly healthy scratch. Like he was still kind of working his way back, but now he's fully healthy and he's going to be the guy. There wasn't anything definitive like that, but that was just my strong vibe.
Okay. And Brandon follows up. He actually had thought about Chris Brooks also, but yeah, I think Ahmed is my preference there. We're getting tailed here. So Jay Cole says that he's duping our lineup here, which we have a strict no duping policy, Jay. So sorry, you cannot. That's going to be if we split the milli with you, we are going to be very upset with you. I want to be clear about that. I'm trying to. There were a lot of good comments here, but I think we have probably made it to the end of the show here. Scott, do you have any final thoughts for the people?
Don't think so.
Scott has no final thoughts. He's given you enough of his thoughts again. He just, by the end of the show, Scott is exhausted. He's been writing for an entire week. He's been talking now for 2 hours. He's just like, I've told you guys everything that you can possibly need to know. So I feel that. I feel that, Scott. All right. Oh, Jay is not in the milli. Okay, good. So he's duping us, but not in the same contest. Well, that is totally legal. You can play it wherever else you want. All right. Thank you guys very much for hanging out with us. We really do appreciate it quite a bit. I'm always really happy with the audience participation that we get. And then, of course, the number of people watching after. We love you guys. Really appreciate you hanging out, watching with us. Again, if you have not yet liked the video, please like the video. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already subscribed to the channel. You can also subscribe to the Fantasy Points channel, which we're live right now on the Stokastic channel, but I know it'll be posted later on the Fantasy Points channel as well. So subscribe to whichever channel or both channels. Ideally, subscribe to our channels. And you can, of course, hit the notification button to get alerts when our shows go live. Follow Scott on Twitter at Scott Barrett. Is it DFB?
DFB.
I always forget the letters, but I get it right usually. At Scott Barrett DFB on Twitter. I'm at PlayerQ DFS. Go give us a follow. Good luck this weekend.